Okay, so some of you watch my channel know that I mostly use the Tascam Model 12 to do my YouTube videos. What you see sitting over here to the left of me, and it's one of the few units out there that's not only a mixing board, but it can do multi-track recording, but also do overdubbing. Some units just will do your live. I guess your live recording, and then that's it. But I purchased mine back in 2020. I think it was the year it first came out, and although I'm always learning something new about it, I've gotten to know it fairly well. So with that said, I thought it might be helpful for some folks if I shared some tips and tricks that I've learned, I guess, over the few years I had mine, as well as features that they may or may not know about. So I guess think of this video, I guess, as more being like almost like an owner's manual inside of a video. Now, originally I was going to do this all in one video, but as I was going along, I realized it was getting too long. So it is split out into three parts. So part one is, or part one, I cover features you may not know about. Part two, I cover tips and tricks on how I use my particular unit. And then part three, I go over some issues I've had with mine, as well as my wish list, what I'd like to see if they ever were to come out with another, an upgraded unit, maybe the model 1200. So I guess this video is probably geared towards either somebody who just bought a Model 12 and you're too lazy to read the manual. I know there's a lot of folks out there like that, myself included. Or B, you had one for a while and you never read the manual, but you think this might be a little helpful to you. Or you did read the manual and you just need a refresher. So with all that said, I guess let's get started. Okay, so first an overview here. Again, I'm going to assume you already own one of these or are very close to buying one. So I'm not going to go into every little detail. There are plenty of YouTube videos you can watch on that. Also, in the interest of time, I'm not going to demo every little tip, trick, or feature, but I will explain how and why you might use certain features. So just a quick overview. So first, it's a mixer. Tracks 1 through 6 are mono. Tracks 7 and 8 and 9 and 10 are stereo, but can also be used in mono. There are two inserts on tracks 1 and 2 if you want to insert any outboard gear. There's Midi in and out on the back. Then you have a one-knob compressor. You have an equalizer. You have auxiliary sends, two sends, and one of them can go to your effects. And your effects, which are over here, you have one set of effects. And then you have a subgroup for submixing. In addition, it's a multi-track recorder. So you can record, tracks 1 through 10, one at a time or all at once. And then you can do a two-track stereo mix down over here. You can also overdub. So if you're building up a song and, again, doing one track at a time, you can record a track and then add another track and another one and so on and so forth. You can also punch in and punch out, just like on an old tape recorder. Third, it's an audio interface. So if you want to hook this up to your computer and use your DAW, you can do that. Just as I said, just as using it as an interface. And then fourth, it's a DAW controller. And as far as how you would use the recorder, well, if you're recording live, you would typically switch the mode over to live. Or if you were hooking this up to your PC, you would have this over here. So if you're using it, for example, as an interface. And then you would go to MTR when you want to use the multi-track recorder or playback. So usually you're recording on live and you're playing back on MTR. And in order to record an individual track, you would arm it. So I'm arming tracks 1 and 2, so that would record tracks 1 and 2 if I hit record over here. And then as far as doing your two-track mix down, you would you would just hit record over here, and that would be recording the mix down. Actually, I didn't want to record over that, but let's do this again. So if you're mixing down, you would basically hit record over here, you know, set your levels however you wanted to, and then mix it down to the 2 tracks. Now every time you hit record over here, it's basically recording on these 2 tracks. So if nothing's armed here, it's going to these 2 tracks. If this is armed, it's recording whatever you armed plus the two tracks. And then in order to play this back, and when I first got this unit, I wasn't using it quite a bit, and I sometimes forget, well, how do I hear what I played back? In order to play it back, you want to press this button, SD main mix return. So when you press that and you press play, you're going to hear your 2-track mix down. So that's it. That's the overview. So now let's talk about some of the fun stuff. Okay, features you might not know about or forgot about. I put together a list of 22 of them. But first, always be sure you're running the latest firmware, which as of August 2024 would be 1.42, which is what I'm currently on. So starting off with number 1, preamps, right? The most important thing you need in order to get your signal up to level when you're recording. I don't know if you know it or not, but there's actually a difference between the first 6 and the last 2 stereo, besides the fact that these are stereo and these are mono. As far as mic level, XLR, they're all the same. It's 0. This is the gain range I'm talking about. It's 0 all the way up through plus 50. However, as far as line level, the first 6 are -10 all the way up to plus 50, and then the last 2 stereo lines go from -20 all the way up to plus 30. Now, why would you care? Well, if you had a line level device that needed a little extra boost, you may want to use channels 1 through 6, so that you can go all the way up to plus 40. If you had a line level device that was a little too hot, you may want to attenuate it and bring it down to minus 20. So that's the difference there. Number 2, you don't need to always be in live mode when you're doing a recording. You can actually record and monitor yourself in MTR. So MTR isn't just for playback. Again, you have to have the record button pushed. Otherwise, you're not going to hear anything. But once you push this, you can monitor yourself and then go forward with your recording. And I find it useful to leave it there in MTR while I'm, tracking and, going back and overdubbing and all that, rather than keep going back and forth to live. So I just wanted to point that out. Number 3, let me shut this off here. Number 3, you may not realize, is that you can record to your PC, your DAW, at the same time that you're recording to the Model 12. Just set it, again, to either live or MTR, hit record, well here, arm the track, right? Arm the track, and then press record over here, and you would be recording to both units at once. Now, why would you want to do that? I couldn't really think of any reason you want to do it. I've actually tried it and it works. I suppose one reason might be maybe you're tracking a live band and you want to do a safety backup at the same time. So you hook up your computer, record there, and then record on here as well. Other than that, I'm not sure why you would do that. All right, moving on. Number 4 is pause. I don't know if you know this or not, but when you're recording, you can actually pause this in the middle of the recording by hitting stop once. If you hit stop once, it will pause. If you hit stop twice, it's going to bring you back to the beginning. Now, why would you care about that? Well, maybe you're recording a live band that's doing a couple sets, at one particular night, and you don't want to keep creating new songs for each set. So after they're done with the first set, hit pause, which is basically hit stop once. After they take their break and come back, hit record again, and it'll pick up from where it left off. So let me stop that. Actually, I'm pausing it, and I'm bringing it back to the beginning. Number 6, markers. Mark. So basically, one of the things that I use it for is maybe I'm recording, I don't know, a practice jam where I'm doing like a bunch of songs, like 10 songs or so. And then I go back and I'm playing them. And yeah, let's say I have 10 songs. Well, what you can do is for each song, just press the marker. You hear the beginning of one song, mark it here. And then the next song comes on a few minutes later. You do another marker, and so on and so forth. And then after you do that, you can then use the forward and reverse button to get to each song, that you've marked. Just makes it a lot quicker. That way you don't have to keep, you don't have to, I guess, fast forward with this or rewind or, listen to the whole thing from the beginning. Repeat or stop. So another function, if you can see it here, is basically, well, let me start all over. If you don't do anything and you're playing a song and it gets to the end, it will keep playing. So if the song's 3 minutes long, at the end of 3 minutes, it'll just keep going on and on and on. And if you walk away for 10 minutes, the counter will be 10 minutes in. So what I do is I have this set for either repeat S1, which I guess means stop. And what it does, when it gets to the end of the song, it will automatically go right back to the beginning and stop. If you hit it again, you've now put it into a repeat mode. And if you can see these little arrows going in a circle, what that will do is when it gets to the end of the song, it will not only go back to the beginning of the song, it will start replaying it. And one thing I guess that's useful for, and I use it for this, is if you're practicing a certain part, maybe you put down a song, and here's what I would use it for, and you're trying to figure out the drum part from beginning to end. I'll just put this on repeat. I have my Roland E drums over there, and I'll keep practicing it, beginning, the end. So I find that useful for that. What else do we have here? Number 7, post-record. What did I mean by that again? Over here. So the post-record button, if you press this down, you can record the off the main, and the advantage of that would be, let's say you're doing a fade out, and you want to fade out the song, so you're recording, everything, you got all these tracks filled, and it's recording away. Well, again, if you have post-record and it gets to the end of the song, everything's post-main. Well, that's what that means. And you could fade it out all the way to the end. Otherwise, if it's not sent to post-record, then it's coming before the main. Number 8. I think I mentioned this earlier. If not, I'm going to mention it again. But in order to hear your 2-track playback without hearing all the individual tracks, in other words, everything you mix down to tracks 11 and 12, in order to hear those, you want to make sure you have the SD main mix return engaged. And that way, when you play it back, you're going to hear your 2-track mix, whether these faders are up or down, and everything that you've included in all the EQ, all the compression, the effects, everything on that 2-track mix will be on here. If this isn't engaged, you're not going to hear that. You're back to the original tracks again. Okay, number 9, the master EQ. The master EQ can be heard in your headphones as well as in your 2-track mix down if you have it engaged, pressed in. So, if you have the bass turned up, the treble turned up, actually the treble's here, the highs, the mids and all that, however you adjust that, you're going to hear that in your headphones, and when you mix down, it's going to go through this. By not having it gauged or having it in bypass mode, it's going to do everything before that. Now, one thing you got to remember, if you do decide you want to add a little EQ to your two-track, I guess I'll call it a master, when you go to play it back, you got to make sure this is bypassed, I believe. Otherwise, I think you're going to double up on everything. I believe it does that. I thought I tested that one time. I could be wrong about that, but you may want to bypass that. What else? Number 10, headphones. Your headphones, all this over here. Your headphones can be set up to pre or post main mix. Now, the advantage of having it being pre-mixed is if you have speakers hooked up to here and you decide, you're going back and forth between your speakers and your headphones, you can just hit mute and you can still hear the sound coming through the headphones. This was actually the result of a couple of years back when the unit first came out. A lot of people were complaining because it didn't have that functionality. It was basically a firmware update that they did, and it was a pain in the neck. What I did at the time, I did a workaround, and I just used the sub to control my my speakers. Well, now you no longer need to do that, so that's what that does. Compression and EQ. The compression and EQ can be set to record either pre or post. By default, the compression and EQ will not record to the individual tracks. It will only be applied to the two-track mixdown that you're recording. However, if you want to, there's a setting that you can set up that allows you to record either after the compressor or the EQ or both to each individual tracks. And just like I mentioned for the EQ, the master EQ before, just remember to set your comp and EQ to 0 if you've printed the EQ and compression. Otherwise, again, you will double up on it. Little tip there. Number 12, auxiliary sends. So the auxiliary send for auxiliary 1 can be set to post or pre-fader, whereas auxiliary 2 is always post-fader, because typically auxiliary 2, well, the way it's set up here, it's mainly used for effects. In my case, I actually have it set up to post. That's why you see that little orange light on, at least, with auxiliary 1. So it's post-fader, because I'm typically using outboard effects. So I'm sending my auxiliary to an outboard effect that's after the fader, and then I'll have it come in and, either channels, like a reverb stereo unit in the channels 7, 8, or 9 and 10. So that's the deal with that. Number 13 is solo mode. So if you want to solo a track, and hear, just what that track sounds like, maybe you're recording a band or playing this back, and you just want to hear, did I get the bass right? What does that sound like? You can either set that up PFL, which I think stands for, was that pre-fader level, I believe, or in-place solo. I prefer to have it, in my case, always set to in-place solo. And what that does, as soon as you hit the solo button, so if I want to solo track 3, it automatically just mutes all the other tracks, and then I could listen to, track 3, or maybe it's track 3 and 5 I want to do, and kind of adjust the faders accordingly. That's just my preference with that. The next, going through here, just give me a second. Number 14, 14 is the phase. You can invert the phase while you're recording. This is useful for recording a singer or songwriter, or maybe a drum set that has multiple mics where you get a lot of mic bleed and the sound can cancel each other out. So you can do it channel by channel. If you need to invert, channel 1, you can invert that and keep all the other channels the same or whatever you need to do. But you have that capability on here. Number 15, you can swap tracks. Basically move them to another track. So if I want to move track 1 to track 3, let's say I recorded everything on 1 and I want to free up space on 1, I can move it to track 3. So what is that useful for? Well, if you have your gear hooked up to channels 1 and 2, all your outboard gear, your mics and all, or whatever you might be coming through, and perhaps you're using the 2 inserts on here for something like compression or an EQ, again, outboard gear. Because there's no other inserts on these other channels, you may, and if you're building up your song, you may want to record it on track 1 and 2, then move it over to, say, 5 and 6, and then clear out tracks 1 and 2 and do your next part or 2, whatever that might be. Maybe now you're adding, guitar solo, so on and so forth. So that's the advantage of that. Or if you're doing a bounce down where you want to use more than the available 10 tracks, let's say you need it like 13 or 14 tracks. You get all your rhythm section done on here. You bounce it onto tracks 11 and 12. Then you clear these out. And then you move 11 and 12, which is in stereo, to, say, 9 and 10. So now all your rhythm section is over here. And then you add your additional tracks and then do your final bounce down. That's what you would use that for. What else? MIDI. You can control drum machines because there's MIDI in and out on here, or sequencers. I happen to own and I think it's a PMC1, and I use that sometimes with my my Tascam Model 12. But the Tascam Model 12 can drive it. Can drive drum machines, and then you just have the drum machine or your sequencer just come into a 2-channel here. There's number 17. There's something called VAMP. I never heard the term VAMP, but it's basically a looper. I haven't used this yet, but I think you're best probably using a foot switch with it. But just to let you know, it is available. 18 effects. You only get one set of effects here, but you do get a lot of choices, hall, room, delays, etc. But one of the things you can do with the effects is you can go into them. You would change them here. You can change the time delay. And then there's also a library if you decide you wanted to save some of your favorite effects. Number 19, somewhat new with, I guess, a firmware update they did. In fact, these last 3 are new with the firmware update they did last year. Gain boost. You can go in, and there's a digital gain boost that you can use to boost, say, a weaker signal, such as a microphone, maybe a Shure SM7. Sometimes they're very difficult to drive, or ribbon mics are very difficult to drive. But what you can do as you're tracking, if you don't have enough level here, say you got this almost all the way pinned, and you still can't hear it. What you would do is you would go in and you would go to, say, track 6 and boost it. And I think you can boost it at either 6 decibels. You got a choice, 6 or 12, whatever's necessary to do that. Again, it's a digital boost in addition to the analog boost that you're doing with the preamp. Number 20, kind of going the opposite way, normalization. Let's say you recorded a signal too hot on channel 6, and you needed to lower that. There's the ability to go into the menu, go into normalization, and bring this down. I think you can go all the way down to minus 20 decibels, if I remember, or somewhere around there. Number 21, we're almost there. Computer playback. This again was an enhancement when this unit first came out, and if you had your DAW hooked up or your computer and you're listening to music, by default it was always going to channels 1 and 2. And a lot of people were complaining that why wasn't this set up to go to a stereo channel? Because if I want to, record with channels 1 and 2 and use the inserts, I can't do it if everything's playing back on here. One of the enhancements Tascam did last year is they now give you the ability to either keep it at the default for channels 1 and 2, or set it to go to channels 9 and 10, or have it go right to the main. That way all your channels are free and it's coming through over here. And then the last item I was just going to mention is you can hook up an iPad through the USB on here, just like you can with your computer. I believe that's because the Model 12 is, I think they call it class compliant or something like that. But at any rate, you can hook up and record, just like your computer, the tracks and all, and playback on here to your iPad. Now, in theory, this should work. I tried it a couple times and I had some issues with it. I'll talk more about that later. But that's it for the 22 features. And next I'm going to go over a handful of some tips and tricks I learned that you might also find helpful. Okay, so that concludes part 1. And as I mentioned earlier, in the interest of time, I decided to break this up into multiple parts. So if you want to watch part 2, I go over some tips and tricks that I learned over the years, I guess, using my Model 12. But before I go, I just wanted to mention one other thing. Before I started working on this, I could have sworn that I read somewhere that the first 6, I guess, channels, the first 6 preamps, were Tascam's better preamps, which I think they call Ultra HDDA. And when I went to go, I guess, fact check myself, because I couldn't remember where I read that, I went to Tascam's website where they, promote the Model 12, and it's got all the features. And I couldn't find anything. I saw where it said Ultra HDDA preamps, but I couldn't see where it said just on channels 1 through 6. And then I went to Sweetwater's website, and the same thing. So when I was talking about the preamps earlier, originally I was going to mention that, but then I decided, well, I must be wrong. I guess all the preamps are their HDDA preamps. Well, since after I filmed this, I was going through the owner's manual, and then I happened to look up in the beginning where they have the introduction, and then they have the features. And the very first line item, it says, Tascam Ultra HDDA mic preamps are on channels 1 through 6. So I don't know if you can see that or not. If not, I'll try to blow it up. So evidently I was correct. Now, at the end of the day, at least to my ears, I can't tell the difference. And I doubt that the average user can, but again, I figured I'd just point that out. And plus channels 7 and 8 and 9 and 10, again, are stereo channels that you would primarily be hooking up line level devices like a drum machine or I guess a synthesizer, keyboard, something of that nature. But just figured I'd mention that, and yeah, maybe we'll see you over when I load up, I guess, part 2. Oh, also one other thing. Feel free to list any comments. If there's anything that that you feel I mentioned that's wrong, because you know the Tascam Model 12 better than I do, let me know. Or if there's any other features you may be aware of that others might be interested in, just list that below. Otherwise, we'll see you later. Thanks.